Well, I sent the article, but we're gonna just let me know that we're gonna be going over another article as well, or at least starting with it.
Chelas and lay Chelas, Blavatsky articles. But we're starting with the culture of concentration, part 2.
That was for today. Next week.
No, this is all for today.
Yeah, for the next week, we don't know yet.
I don't know yet. Yeah.
We'll see how far we get.
Yeah.
That Chelas and lay Chelas might be pretty meaty.
Yeah.
Welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. We have some usuals and some guests. Welcome. Streaming this, usually have some people joining. We have some in the chat. But we'll see. Oh, Rose says hi, everyone. Hi, Rose.
Hi.
So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll read a little quote for today.
Okay.
It's a good one. The Blavatsky quote today comes from, and I don't know, oh yeah, it comes from 5 Messages, which I think is probably in these volumes, actually, 5 Messages.
Yeah.
So the recognition of pure Theosophy, the philosophy of the rational explanation of things and not attains, is of the most vital importance in the society, inasmuch as it alone can furnish the beacon light needed to guide humanity on its true path. Been talking a lot about that just last time too. Before we get started, our guests, you guys want to introduce yourselves?
My name is Ozzy. I'm her friend. She's a tag wall.
How did you guys kind of come about us?
Well, I think I'm like in my path to be a mystical practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
So I read tarot since I was a little girl. Also, this year I've been researching on the 7 rays and the 7 bodies, place of being.
Mm-hmm.
And
You find a lot of 7s here, yes. Septenary nature.
yeah. I don't know, one thing led me to another, and actually I've been looking for a study group as well. I want to like learn more,
Yeah.
and have some sort of direction, if that makes sense.
Awesome. It's wonderful to have you. It's always nice we all have like pretty interesting, at least, I mean, even some of the most common are pretty interesting stories of how we found this place. So yeah, it's always great. Thank you.
My name is Coraima.
What's that?
My name is Coraima.
Corona?
Yeah, but you can call me Cora because I know that.
Cora?
Thank you.
Cora has. Okay, so today we're continuing. A few weeks ago, we were doing an article by William P. Judge, who worked with Helena Blavatsky very closely in her work, and there are a number of like articles that they both did. The first one, the is one of Judge's articles. It's part 2. We did part 1 a few weeks ago. To kind of recap like some of what the end of part 1, what we talked about. We were discussing in the Judge article, cultural concentration. It's not that someone has to become cultured from without and like gain, be an expert or be knowledgeable in many different subjects, themselves. But
Society, man.
yeah, or like I mentioned, like a Renaissance woman that can do all these different things, or man, and that's all knowledge gained from without. But what Judge emphasizes in the cultural concentration is that we have this essence within us that doesn't need that outside information. What we need to do is be in touch and develop that, our awareness of that inner aspect of ourselves. And he talked about the spirit, but then he talked about a separate aspect of ourselves called the inner, or the inner astral aspect of ourselves. And that's the part that he was talking about focusing on through yoga. He explained hatha yoga, which is one way to get somewhat of an understanding and gain some powers or some intuitional insights, but not spiritually, more just psychically. But through Raja Yoga, this uncovering and focusing on the different aspects of and kind of peeling away, like we're not this body, we're not just the everyday mind. There are emotions, our desires, we're not only that, but peeling that away, keep peeling away. And we're discovering one of the aspects, which is this inner astral. He says, you know, we have to develop that by concentrating, by also virtues, practicing being virtuous, like having charity, and charity of, it's more of like charity of mind to the faults of others, or not just, you know, giving material things, it's charity. Also, one of the other paramitas is like harmony in word and act. So not being, you know, walking the walk and talk instead of just talking the talk, but walking the walk as well. And patience. And there's a few other, you know, other virtues to help us to develop this inner astral. The end part that we talked about the last session, part one, was how emotions, he says, disrupt this inner astral, and especially anger. So one of the things that we're also to do is to not be overtaken by emotions. He says that anger is the worst one, and there's no justification for anger, even if you're wronged. Somehow there's no reasons for anger at all, and that having anger causes, he says, like a violent breaking apart. Astral. Another one is envy, and he said that by having envy, that causes like a putrefaction of this inner astral. So we're to, you know, avoid those and being emotions. Vanity is another one, and that one he says causes erroneous astral images to appear before us, and then it completely like sways our judgment, so that we don't really have correct judgment of ourselves or our surroundings or what's real. So those are like some of the things of the part one of the culture of concentration. Now, I mentioned the virtues, and you know, he says in part two that, you know, selflessness and the virtues are emphasized to start on the path. But those alone, the virtues alone, are not what's going to help us along the path. We have to practice selflessness and altruism as well. But, you know, having, he says, minutely understanding ourselves. So with this Raja Yoga, you know, like I mentioned, peeling away the different aspects of ourselves to get to the essence of who we really are. Everything.
We're swapping out the speakers.
We can wait, yeah.
Yeah, we just wait till we get it sorted so that.
Yeah, are you hearing better now, guys? Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
No questions about that?
Could you explain like the 7 principles, how it's done? Like,
Well,
what, so I might give them a state. I don't know, because I've been to look them up.
Yeah, it starts. Or it may cause one to be born in a family of devotees or those far advanced on his path, as said in the Bhagavad Gita. But such a birth exists. Hence, the virtues alone will not always lead in short space to our object. We must make up our minds to a life of constant work upon these lines. The lazy ones, or they who ask for pleasure, may as well give it up at the threshold and be content with the pleasant task marked out for those who fear God and honor the King. Immense fields of investigation and experiment have to be traversed. Dangers unthought of and forces unknown are to be met, and all must be overcome. For in this battle there is no quarter asked or given. Great stores of knowledge must be found and seized. The kingdom of heaven is not to be had for the asking. It must be taken by violence. And the only way in which we can gain the will and the power that we thus seize and hold this is by acquiring the virtues on one hand and minutely understanding ourselves on the other. Someday we will begin to see why not one passing thought may be ignored and not one fleeting impression missed. I'm going to stop there.
Where are you?
On 331, that's going to be different here. So this paragraph, we must make up our minds to a life of constant work.
Right next to the third.
Can everybody hear us online?
Thanks for your patience.
It's good, thanks.
Okay. So, anyone have any questions? Well, we just read or read.
I mean, sounds pretty heavy, but that's the Bhagavad Gita, the dramatic,
The battle.
I mean, yeah.
So yeah, by violently taking, yeah, I'm just alluding to the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said last week and keep saying, like, you can read the Bhagavad Gita almost like the Iliad, like a attic on it.
Well, in what sense is it violent? So,
I mean, there's a lot of meditations that supposedly use violent imagery as well, like cutting through or, taking back and trying to use some of the aspects of that we can use. Yeah.
I think my listening sacred words yours guys, right? I guess. Like, if you're a business owner, if you deserve it, why you have to ask for an engagement, and you just take it. Oh, so right. Being
Well,
part of,
that's all true. And part of the violence is what you're gonna experience by trying to not pay attention to your personality. It becomes a war between who's the boss,
yeah, someone has to
you
do it.
or you.
Yeah.
And then that's, part of it. And we have so many different ways. A good example on this plane is someone that is trying to get out of addiction. If you're in addiction, it's a violent act to not be addicted.
It is,
And the violence is all within yourself and your mind and your physical body.
that's right. I've been through like several nights of disorder. So, like, starting myself to personality, I guess. And I always tell my friends that, have you seen like this anything sort of attraction in the middle of like a storm? Like, it's like a sheep in the middle of the storm, and there's a kraken, there's like a kraken, like battling the kraken. Like, you're the storm, you're the sheep, you're the kraken, and you're the kraken.
Yeah.
All at the same time. That's how it feels.
Jerry, you hand up. You
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, Jerry, go ahead, thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking that an additional way to look at this, I think the other ones that we're talking about now are all valid, but an additional way to look at it is it points to the violence word is a metaphor, if you will, and it indicates the degree of effort necessary. How strong an effort's necessary to accomplish the goal. And maybe not to be confused with violence in its traditional meaning. I was thinking about like when they were trying to break the 4-minute mile, athletes were trying to break the 4-minute mile. It would take an intense effort to do something that no one's ever done before. And you can imagine the training and the exercise and the discipline necessary to do something, like that. So that may be another take on the idea.
So, the idea of acting upon something rather than being guided, you have to act on it. Otherwise, staying passive, you're devoured by whatever it is, And I heard when Terry was reading about the practice of virtue. So we know that every human being has the ability to practice virtue. As poor as one gets sometimes, the virtue, that's something to be active upon anything. Because the idea of this yoga that we study here, hatha yoga and raja yoga, it has to do with this activity, and it has to do with model. What is the model of practicing this? Or what is the model for studying this? So that's what you're gonna teach you in one way or the other. Because you can become wise and an adept, whether for good or bad. All this philosophy that we have advanced, and as it was mentioned, all of this means something within yourself. All the powers that we can imagine are latent within ourselves. So some of these things can awaken that, but then again, it's modern and the idea of being active instead of passive.
Yeah, I really like that. But that plays with me a lot. It's a very big word for action. It's very noticeable. You can't really pass that up. We always talk about the bio of action as well. But it's always like drastic action. Again, what you said, it takes drastic action to not be addicted to something. And to just never do it for the rest of your life. You are and depending on you look at the addiction. Yeah.
I need to what Wilson says, everything we thought have full factors, negative and positive. In Matthew, I think in Matthew, it says, if you know heaven, make it strong, and only the violent conquer. You know, you have to be violent to conquer the enemy of yourself. Right? If the enemy is not outside, it's inside. You know, and you have to be violent to conquer this kingdom.
Yeah, there's another Blavatsky article called that the self as the friend and the self as the enemy.
But also it's like, I do agree with it, but also I think there's a thing right in like understanding that you are your own enemy, but also you cannot be enemies of yourself. In the sense of, in certain times you have to surrender and isolation to that status, right? Because there's no integration with your life fighting against this. You have to integrate it.
But, yeah, you have to know what are you surrendering to, in a way. And, you know, the study kind of, you know, gives you ideas in what is surrendering to what. Because then you might become, I mean, like you, and then you become, surrendering to something that is not really, that way for myself.
Oh, what I meant is like surrendering, like accepting that that's part of you, being the, I don't know, maybe your, or your ego is like the gatekeeper of all the things that are supposed to be considered, right? Or the things that are supposed to be internally. So it's like, I feel like it's more like that balance is like, it's like the evolution of acting more than an act itself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because in one of the other articles or what we were discussing a couple weeks ago, like willpower is not because like will by itself is no moral, but it's how you use your willpower. That you either use it for selfish purposes or unselfish purposes, or you use it for, you know, your willpower can be influenced by this, what we're talking about, this higher aspect of ourselves, or it can be influenced by other things. So that's the will is not, it's kind of neutral, but it's how we use it and what we're influenced by. That kind of in line what you were thinking.
Yeah, but it's also like, I don't think like this, feeling those aspects of yourself, because it's what is making it, and it's somewhere we learn in life, right?
Let me take something from the book of the silence. Having become indifferent to optical perception, the people maxes out the data of the senses. The two producers equal awake illusion. The mind integrates the flavor of the real. Let the disciple replace the flavor.
So, yeah, I agree and understand with what you're saying, is that it doesn't do you any good to feel guilty about things that you've done. So in that sense, we have to own it. But on the other sense, we have to realize that that was done out of misconception of who we really are. So, where, you know, the part that you just read, you have to have the mind, let the slayer slay the mind. But that's only talking about this personality mind experience. So, you know, Kelly at the beginning talked about paramitas as a virtues, and the whole key of those is not that you have to do them to be good, because that's like a negative power. It says that these planes of consciousness have keys, They either open you up or shut you out, depending on what the quality of your being is. And the quality is not the acts that we do, because we can witness someone doing an act, but we don't necessarily know why they're doing it. If someone goes into a store and they rob the store, say, oh, that's a bad person. Then you find out the person is robbing the store because they have no other way to feed their baby. Well, it's still not so great, but it's not as bad as the person's going to rob the store because they'd like to fix it. Scaring the shit out of someone, right? And just on this plane, we realize that. So these planes of being have their own natural guardians that either open us up to it or block us out, depending on the quality of our nature. And so that's why I say in practice these paramitas, it's not to be a goody-goody, it's to be good for something, and it's to purify your nature so that you can actually go and exist in that plane, because otherwise you're going to be blocked out. And that's kind of what it's saying. You feel guilty about something that isn't helping yourself, unless you actively do something to change what you're feeling guilty about. And feeling guilty about it doesn't really matter. It's already history. What's only going to change is if you change your actions so whatever you felt bad about doing, you don't continue to do. And you've purified your own nature. But you've done it actively. You haven't done it because someone told you to. You've done it because in yourself you realize it's not productive to you as a being as to how you want to live. And that's kind of the key of what it's trying to get us to do. It's trying to help us realize that we have a soul accumulated wisdom and experience that is here karmically for a specific purpose to kind of work out the problems that we didn't get to finish because we died. But we forget that. So this is, how do you remember what you're here for? And by being able to open up your everyday mind to the promptings of that consciousness is how we kind of start to improve, even in our daily life. But it's not easy, so that's why I'm talking about violence, because it's like, it's going to be hard work because you develop these habits. Just like whatever you eat, it takes a while to change what you like to eat. Or anything else, that it becomes a habit, instead of just a habit, it becomes the quality of your nature. And that's how people recognize, oh, they're going to want to go to McDonald's today because they always want to go to McDonald's. So whatever it is, you know.
I think it's really cool about, there's when we think it's like so kind of a good simple description of what Theosophy is. This continuity since each other is flat, and they constantly remembering the appropriateness of the instrument. The one keeps saying it keeps coming up, it's faction their side, into the work of the instrument. It's not even great, it's on purpose, or it's just, it is a central theme of the Theosophy stuff, but it's very how it's balanced in the flat.
Okay, I'll bring in the chat, and then Gary has his hand up. Gary, go ahead, Gary.
I think Rose was in front of me and she was waiting for a while. I'll defer to her.
Barbara?
Oh, Barbara. Barbara said, "Will can be good," and go ahead, Gary.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was wanting to make sure we stayed in order. Yeah, this is an important topic because it's a common human experience universally. We can recognize within our own consciousness more than one voice. I mean, a common experience of a human being is to react to something, reflect on it and say, rats, I could have done that better. I should have said it this way, or I should have done it that way. Well, I mean, what was the reaction voice and what's the reflection voice. So, and then as others have mentioned, go on a diet, any kind of diet, to try to cut out sugar or something like that. There's a part of you saying, 1 root beer is okay. It's okay. That one piece of candy, it's not going to be a big deal. And another part of you that's saying, no, I made a commitment, no more candy this year. This is what happens when a human being chooses to make a change in their life of any kind. There's going to be resistance. And for the reasons that others have mentioned, they've got all these habits, which are basically elementals that have been impressed with a certain way of doing things, a certain way of thinking, a certain way of responding, and they're all autonomic. But we are self-conscious beings. We can choose. So when we choose to take a new path, we have to kind of build the path. And that means we have to push through the habit and create a new one, create a new pattern, a new cycle. So in that sense, if you kind of just take that common experience, you can see the reason why sacred texts say things like, the self is the enemy of self. You could say the weaker self is the enemy of the stronger self, or the lazy self is the enemy of the disciplined self. But this ability to assert the will to accomplish something is where the struggle lies.
Right. Yeah, will is a spiritual power. That's a spiritual power, and how we use it determines what the effect is.
It just means in action.
Spirit in action.
In action.
Also, in this studies, you try not to, nobody gets married to the terminology. What you read from the rest of the science, if you don't want to use the term kill, those habits of mind, it is transforming or transmuting. Because it's kind of like the same energy, it's just how are we using it? Somebody mentioned that, the willpower. Nothing is good or bad. It's how we use things, how we use this willpower. So maybe all the things that I don't like about myself, or the ones that I still don't know, that I should change or heal or transmute or transform, it's something that will transform me. And by transforming me, obviously the environment is going to change, and I can also help changing others. It's very easy to see when somebody really upset. I can see it, I can feel it, I see the color. So the idea of changing things in our thoughts or whatever experience we have had, or whatever we want to change, and it's only transmuting that energy. Jerry said element, it's that energy that we keep transmuting. He also said at the beginning, the way we understand, violence. So that's an important aspect that when we study, you always find different meanings of the same term or the same word. And so, because it applies to each one in a different way.
I think that's really fun, is like, especially in the Austrians. Ever since Blavatsky started writing and people like Nepal and things like that, they're going to advance in a lot of the language and terminology that it's more specific than more people given Westerners have an understanding of Sanskrit and things like that. So it's relatively recently people have any handle on the Egyptian book of the dead, I think.
Okay, we're gonna shift a little bit. So we're talking about, we've been talking about this personality, the willpower. There's another article by Blavatsky called "Our Tale as Mediums," and we're not gonna read out from that because I'm just gonna segue from that to the tailors and lay tailors. But it's about thinking about who we are. And with the personality, there's, so many layers of how we're influenced. Blavatsky mentions that we're very strongly influenced by like our nationality or hereditary, where, you know, the culture that we were born in with all of those cultural, influences, ways of thinking, you know, from a country, from your community, your local community to your family, are all these influences on how we react, how we make decisions, how we, you know, can judge each other and the prejudice also. So she's saying in this Taylor's medium, like she's saying pretty much a medium is a person. She describes like this description of a medium, a person through whom the action of another being is said to be manifested and transmitted, and we should like to be permitted to add by either consciously or unconsciously active will of that, be influenced by the active will of that other being. And a medium is a person through whom the action of another being is said to be manifested and transmitted to an abnormal extent by the consciously or unconsciously active will of that other being, to such an extent that they lose their self-control and have no more power or will of their own to regulate their own actions. So she's saying that pretty much everyone, to some extent, consciously or unconsciously, is a medium. And she gives an example of soldiers and a general. Like, you know, in an army, there's a general that the soldiers revere and look up to, and they follow that general through the battle and are influenced by his commands and depending, you know, by his ways of being. But she says also, you know, we can be influenced by an idea or an emotion beyond control. And earlier in the talk, I was talking about how George said the emotions such as like anger, which is the worst one, envy, vanity, and fear as well, can cause, you know, this break apart of our inner astral. But we can, you know, be so influenced by these emotions or some ideas, like Colin mentioned, like if you're in a, you know, this whole like mob mentality and you're doing things kind of against your own will, but you're going along and you are like a medium of that mob. He also then goes on to say that you know, can also be influenced, like we were talking about, from a higher aspect, a spiritual aspect of our mind, and we can be a medium of that. And through the training that we were talking about, with focus concentration, with the Raja Yoga, realizing ourselves, and then what we're going to segue into Taylor's and May Taylor's, is developing this instrument to be also influenced by your higher self, but, you know, also influenced by an adept guru. So that's where we're going to continue now with like the Taylors. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, AA groups, they suggest to have communication with other AA members. In this way, you can get influence from each other. We can talk. And the group of the business also, they have the requirement for being associated with other devotees. Because in this way, you can interact with ideas and styles and kind of stuff. And we are not the exception. It's the same here with ULT. ULT suggests also to have communication with other
Other students.
associated, you know, because in this way you can interact and have influence with ideas and styles.
Yeah.
Right, and that's different. That's like a conscious, you know, mediumship, where she, in other areas, she, you know, guards us against medium, like, you know, maybe natural, like mediums that passively let other influences, like you were talking about, elementals or elementals come through them. She warned that that's very dangerous and not something that you should be doing. And, but, you know, if you're consciously, you know, trying to place yourself in what with more positive influences, this is what she recommends. And especially within our own retired self and adapt to
Part of the change in, it's okay.
Trying to find the article.
I just had tables up here and okay, so.
No, it should be on the 309. Is that the ULTLA?
It won't be.
And the other thing that I want to add here is the other thing I want to ask is, how this influence has with the elements, where there's a fire, water, air, wind. On these interaction that we have, we also interact with those elements within each other.
Right. Yeah, because we're all connected.
Yeah.
I mean, they brought up a good point why we were having technical difficulties earlier. You said what? What is the astrological influence?
So tomorrow, Saturn goes retrograde. So basically right now, it's the last degree of its movement being stationary. From Earth's perspective.
Right. From our perspective, it's going in reverse.
So basically, we're going to enter the period of time that happens every year, where we are going to be like, basically our partner, like our actions for the last period of time and the last afflicted things.
Right.
So like if you did your work, if you show up for your friends, if you show up for your work, in general, and also our source, like only one, but like, it's supposed to be. So from now on, we expect it to have delays or unfortunate situations because you're going to be reviewed by this entity. So the last, I think couple of days, like 4 or 5 days, the last week, kind of like until today, in Saturn is being set in the room, things are not going as planned. Because the time,
Yeah.
basically like virtually or symbolically, you know, it's stagnant.
It's stagnant and it's giving you time to review like we did. Because instead of keep going back or instead of keep going forward, it's just say, okay, now we're going to review what just happened and give you a chance to see it again and make a correction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So right now, for me, my friends were since I'm not going to the plan that we are having money. We cannot, which is happening, time, which is Saturn, which
Yeah.
is stationary.
I think also Saturn has to do with boundaries and borders and structures and laws. It's pretty soon those are going to be it was been with like. But I think Jerry had his hand up. For some reason I can't hit the thing to make the hand go down. But if you want to try, Jerry, Roger.
Yeah, thank you. It kind of takes itself down, you know, after you have a chance to speak. So, just so you know, the audio issue is those people who are close to the mic, we hear them fine. Everybody else is fuzzy and interrupted. So we hear Kelly and Colin fine, but no one else pretty much. It's really hard to make out what folks are saying. So I just wanted to address what Kelly was asking about, or opening it up for the Chela, lay Chela question. I thought it was interesting to discover that the word Chela comes from the Sanskrit meaning one eager to learn. One eager to learn. And I was thinking about my experiences raising my children and all the sports teams I coached them in. In any group of children, whether we were playing soccer or softball or baseball or whatever the game was, there was always a couple of players, girls and boys, who were super eager to learn. Like everything you said to them, they just soaked it up and used it and tried it right away. And others that just wanted to do it their own way and, kind of la-di-da their way through it. So, yet again, we're coming back to this idea of discipline, the ability to discipline, which is, in a manner of speaking, I think, the capacity to concentrate, to bring the mind to a focus towards some activity or some object. So I was hoping that those comments could blend in what we're talking about.
Yep. Right.
Okay, so yeah, let's get into the tailors and lay tailors. Okay, yeah, from the start.
As the word Sheva has, among others, been introduced by Theosophy into the nomenclature of Western metaphysics, and the circulation of a magazine constantly writing, it will be as well with some more definite explanation than heretofore is given with respect to the meaning of this term, and the rule of cherishing for the benefit of our European, if not Eastern members. A Sheva, then, is one who has offered himself or herself as a pupil to learn practically the hidden mystery of nature and the psychical. The psychical powers latent in the head. The spiritual teacher to whom poses his candidature is called in India and Buddha, and the real guru is always an adept in the advanced science, and that is profound knowledge, esoteric and esoteric, especially the latter. And the one big God is funnel nature in the subjection of the will. He can develop in himself both the power to see, to control the forces of nature, and the capacity to conquer secrets by the help of the formerly latent but now active powers of his being. This is the real guru. To offer himself as a candidate for leadership is easy enough. To develop into an adept is the most difficult path anyone could possibly take. There are scores of natural-born poets, mathematicians, mechanics, statesmen, etc. But a natural-born adept is something practically impossible. For those who do here at very rare intervals, but ones who have an extraordinary innate capacity for the acquisition of occult knowledge and power, yet using it to pass the self-same tests and probations, and go through the same self-training that any endowed fellow master. In this matter, it is never true that there is no royal road by which favors can be traveled. That's great. There is no royal road by which favors can be traveled.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy enough to offer as a candidate for a candidate, but we're going to see it's not that easy.
Yeah.
So keep on reading for centuries, and then go through the first the qualifications, and then that paragraph right after the qualifications.
For centuries, the selection of Keros outside the hereditary belief within the Gompa temple has been made by the Himalayan Mahatmas themselves for among the class in Tibet, a considerable one as to number of natural mystics. The only exceptions have been in the cases of Western men like blood, Thomas Bond, Paracelsus, Pico de Mirandola, Count Saint Law, etc. These temperamental affinities to this celestial science more or less force the distant depths and comes personal relations with them, and enable them to get such small or large portion of the whole truth as was possible in their sacred surroundings. From Book 4 of B2, chapter on the law of Upasana, we learn that the qualifications expected in the Chela were 1. I love this. perfect physical health, 2, absolute mental and physical purity, 3, unselfishness of purpose, universal charity, 3, for all and beings, 4, truthfulness and unswerving faith in the law of karma, independent of any power in nature that could interfere. The law of these forces not to be obstructed by any agency, not to be caused to deviate by prayer or propitiatory and military ceremony. A courage undaunted, courage undaunted in every emergency, even by peril to life. 6, an intuitional perception of one's gains, the vehicle of the manifested at a it's Savar. Thank you. Or divine Atman. Here. Number 7, calm indifference for but a just appreciation of everything that constitutes the objective and transitory world in its relation with and to the invisible. Such accolades must have been the recommendations of one aspiring to perfect change, with the sole exception of birth, which in rare and exceptional cases might have been modified. Each one of these points and things is very insignificant. And almost have been more or less developed in nature by the chairman's uncountable ability before he can be actually put through that test. There are most of us here have much to be down there.
Yeah.
And that was it, yeah. I love it though, the way, I love the way that for his book is living complete concept of Quan, and then 5, the literally to be brave and to be courageous and be incredible life.
Yeah, ultimately self-love.
Really.
Now, what the Vara is the Bodhisattva of the compassion.
I cannot say that. I see that all that word all the time. Like, you know,
Check-setting, this is time.
Can you go back?
Check-setting is repeated.
yeah.
In our Vara is Bodhisattva.
Can you go back to the ones, up before that, where she talked about the ones that were Western sailors? Right here, you go back down, where it says, you know, for centuries sailors were in, you know, in the Tibet. But the individuals in the West were able to actually work with the adept by their nature. And I think that's important. You know, we think of a guru as someone where we have to find someone, which if we're lucky enough that you can meet an individual and they can teach you these methods of self-awakening, but most of us aren't in a position to meet someone like that. But it's these individuals in the Western, because of their inner nature, the adepts connected with them. They don't say specifically, but it's not like they flew that they came into Paris to teach them personally. And that gets to the, you know, there's a statement in a lot of different philosophies that when a student is ready, the teacher appears. So sometimes the way this happens or can happen is in a dream or in a meditation. Because of how you've been working on yourself and developed yourself to a certain level. Other cultures have ways to induce this. Like if you were in the Native American culture, you might have a vision quest, and it's done as a ceremony, and your consciousness is raised to a certain level where you can have this experience. But our culture doesn't just generally have that. But it's saying that it's not impossible for anyone. It's just, you have to develop yourself to a certain stage where you make yourself known to the adept, because then you're useful to the brotherhood to try and help humanity. It's no difference than, like here, you can be on a baseball or football team in a really crummy district, in a really poor town, in a state that isn't known for having good players. When you get to a certain level, there's college scouts that will be aware of you and they'll pull you out of that situation and give you a shot. Or the same, someone's in a small college team, and they get pulled out, and next thing you know, they're one of the top drafts in a sports team. And that's on this plane. So if we do that just mechanically here, we have to kind of think that adepts that are working on a very high mental and spiritual plane have to be aware of individuals that have gotten themselves to a position where they can help a lot of other individuals, and then they can work with you. And I think it's good to keep that in mind, because a lot of times people are like, well, before I can even start on this, I got to find the right guru. And they spend a lot of time searching, going to different places. And, you know, sometimes you can learn something from a certain person. And sometimes you might work with a person for a long time and not get anywhere. So I think it's something to keep in mind, because there are, as it says, it's a rare exception, but it's not impossible.
It's scouting being a really interesting analogy. It really works. Yeah, people like Larry Carter and Bo Jackson doing photos in no population towns. And growing up, you know, they were growing up in like college, they didn't have the kind of competition that people in bigger cities had, or, you know, growing up. As soon as they got to the pros or college, just stay, you know. Larry Bird didn't grow up with what's his name, Falcon, Luka. And you've got some of the big NBA like European stars right now. Growing up, they have nowhere near the competition level in the American.
And the coaching.
Yeah, and the scouts find them, they make themselves the appropriate instrument in the NBA or something.
Because they have a focused path that they're working.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very,
the discipline, like Jerry's pointing out.
yeah, the discipline, big area, these seven steps, yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, to even, you know, mental, just even like, how many people have perfect physical health? And she says, you know, this one can be kind of altered. I mean, you know, Blavatsky herself wasn't in perfect health, but the master worked with her because she had, you know, some of the other, all these other aspects developed.
Well, when she's younger, I think she was pretty amazing how from being like the road trying and being battles and stuff.
Yeah. But like, how many people have put the how many absolute mental and physical purity? You know what?
I don't know, what's that crossing over here?
Well, they're saying it is, yeah. It is possible, yes. There are obstacles, but like I heard a phrase, there are obstacles but no barriers. You know, we will see many obstacles, but we can actually do these things. And like you said, this is our birthright. We have this within us to develop and understand.
Well, maybe not in this lifetime.
Right.
You know, we study common information. So once you make a decision, that's what we are going to expect. And maybe it won't happen this life. But because we study common information, it will happen in another life. Because now all these people that we're talking about, wherever you're born, where is that coming from? You know, it's already within them. They didn't have to be in a society like us, and yet, we come with those talents. Where did that come from? So, the idea that we learn through reincarnations, that's how we are, the concept of it. Because we go through several reincarnations, and we get that kind of perfection. And of course, this is only speaking about the disciples. Because it was mentioned that then to be a death, that's very rare. And therefore, adepts are not born, they are made. Which means that you have to go to the scale. In life, there's 100 lifetimes, maybe 3, maybe 1, maybe 100. But the idea is that there is a possibility. But you're right, I mean, you read that, and when I read that, it's also that. It is, in this lifetime. But you never know, because really, it's actually things that we really know ourselves within ourselves. We're only judging ourselves by the external, world. How I think, how I act, but what are we really within ourselves? What is the nature of the real being is kind of that. And so that's, it's not there to like how much of the feeling. And so, like Jim Carrey said in a movie, I don't know, I think that he finds out he's got somebody, like he said, maybe like, I don't know how many millions of, stars, and then he said, oh, there's a possibility.
Always being the, solution of this problem,
I don't remember, yeah, but anyway, so there is a possibility here, that you can become at least a chair at the beginning.
Well, the other thing is you don't know how much you've already developed in those other lifetimes. So you might have already been a Kayla for a lot of different lifetimes. You're just not aware of all that development yet. And that's, we see people that maybe they're a musician and they don't start till they're, in the late 20s or 30s, and then they're a pretty phenomenal musician. And we see kids that come in like 4 or 5 and are already a phenomenal musician and other things. So these talents are developed in another life. And it's just, when does it awaken in this life where you start back on the path of taking off where you left off on that development? And some people it's going to be easier than other people because some have already developed, whether they know it or not. In other ones, it might be their first time or it might be their 5th time. That's the thing.
Like you with like you tell your mom out when you go and talk. Isn't that kind of the idea though? He is in depth, but he's not. I mean, he's born and have training they have, but they have to guide him to coming into it. Like without with all the moms around him, without everybody recognizing the reincarnation. I don't know if you ever get to the point without it finding out.
Right. You have to remember.
Yeah,
that he
I
was
remember.
the Dalai Lama.
In the last one, I don't remember what the last big holiday was, but they showed the little blind and his speech. It was the very first time I heard him be bold enough to say, even so humble, but he said, he's like, listen, I am even calling on my, I remember my past incarnations. I know what I have to do. Like, you usually don't even do that holy direct. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, now he's what, in his 80s?
Oh, yeah, he's always said, don't worry, everybody, we're going to live past 100. You say that? Yeah, he said that, yeah.
So number 7 is interesting because it calls the difference for, but there's a just appreciation of everything that constitutes the objective and transitory world in its relation with and to the invisible regions. So this is an interesting one. There's a book also that we study in Theosophy called Light on the Path. And it talks about this where you are to, not be ambitious, but work as one who has ambition. And to not be not want like the pleasures of life, but appreciate people or appreciate life that, people have these pleasures or have, this appreciation for everyday life. So it's saying that we're not to be apathetic, but we're not to be like attached to these everyday, like ambition, we're to work hard and be like, it's been mentioned here, dedicated and have discipline, but not ambition for just like, for in today's world, ambition is for ourselves to get ahead of something else. So it's to not work like that, but to work as strongly as that for the benefit of all. So I think, that's like an interesting one. And Light on the Path is really good about explaining that as well. And
Yeah, that's interesting when it says calm indifference.
yeah,
Or God at the same time appreciate everything. But the idea of indifference, I think it goes back to Gary's comment that how we understand indifference. Because it's like speaking about being indifferent to everybody, is what we're saying. I guess it's some kind of not attached to things, not attachment to ideas, to feelings, to anything. Because, I mean, it's not easy not to be attached. We get attached to everything. I get attached to my ideas, my feelings. And sometimes I don't want to let go of them. So the idea of an attachment, I think it goes along with indifference to things. And because it mentions transitory things, we know everything is transitory. Everything is complete change. So I guess it's good to have that kind of indifference because I gain nothing by getting attached to something that isn't constant change.
right, and that's where, that's where your suffering comes from.
And so I think my first protection is
Exactly, yeah.
Holding on to expectations, yeah, I think perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can sense, like, it's interesting because, like, some people, they've lost their job or there's a change happening, and we talk about, like, just, to trust yourself, trusting yourself. Don't be, like, desperately having this desperation feeling. People can sense when you have that sort of desperate, like, grasping, and then that kind of pushes. That's like an energy that pushes away. But if you're kind of just open and trusting yourself, and that you're doing the best that you can, people can sense that. And can sense that, that energy is open, more open for possibilities. Yeah.
Yes, I think if I need to go back, like you said, it's what we talked about, the habits of also think about the karma of what happens when these elementary habits between us interact. And then with the trees and all kinds of things like this manifest when you live on convention unless we're like good, but each other, like we really like got your habits totally under control. Like it's speaking in the perspective of like really having control over your momentum.
And that part is why it says that in its relation with infinite invisible reason.
Right.
Yeah, Justin using the term elemental in Theosophy, when we think, when we speak, but mainly when we think, we're impressing the invisible fabric of nature. And he brought up, the wind, the air, the fire, the earth, and other mystic writers, they talk about the gnomes, the elves, the salamanders. It's all different ways to say that there's a part of the fabric of nature that carries our impression. And we're impressing them, and those impressions then create this plane of existence. So if you're angry, you're creating a cloud of angriness. And that cloud of angriness can be magnetically attracted to anyone that's angry. That's why when you're angry, and the more angry you get, the more angry you get, and you get more and more angry because you're magnetically pulling in that nature into yourself because they feed on what they've been programmed. And the only way that changes is by your mental energy changing. And so that's when we're talking about elementals, it's a whole fabric of nature that we program, in a sense, with our feelings and thoughts. So you read about, say, the astral plane. The astral plane is this plane of nature that's made up with this fabric that we call elemental, that then record and have these feelings, the sounds, the images that we think. That's why if you go to someone that's even a halfway mediocre but have a little bit of power at a fortune teller, they can tell you what, I see this woman and she looks like might be your grandmother and she's picking up this fabric that you've already programmed, and she's sensitive enough, he's sensitive enough to pick up on it, but they're only picking up bits and pieces of it. So they might think it's your grandma that's passed away, but your grandma might be still alive. So they don't get all the information right, but they're sensing this that we all participate in. And so that's a term that we use in Theosophy as elementals, because they're not like minerals like we think of iron and gold and silver. They're the souls of that. They're the electromagnetic intelligences behind that then eventually it can express as a solid metal here or as a tree, but there's an intelligence there. And so that's when he's using that term, that's what we're talking about.
I think it's part of the time after this service in the Eastern country, something with elementary, they were just like poetry and like but I don't know how to say test like really hard and really even like near death experiences to test you if you are worthy of
entering that world.
Yeah.
And
the Western folk tradition, a lot of talking about elemental long before the last.
Yeah. And so these terms like the Akasha is a higher plane of the astral. And so if you're going to practice, like we said, practice high magic, to enter that world, you have to go through the astral plane into the Akashic plane. The Akashic plane is going to embody the intelligence of the higher depth, of the bodhisattvas, of the angels, of whatever religion people are talking about. It's those higher thoughts that this Akashic plane is holding. We could say that's the thought plane of truth for this whole system. The other is the thought plane of humanity that is kind of clouded with a messed up thought. And so if you're practicing high magic, you can be tricked, as you said, by these elementals. They're going to present you all images to dissuade you from going any higher. I mean, that's what Lord of the Rings is about.
It's the whole story.
That's basically Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
That's the whole story of his life.
Yeah.
As soon as he was, thought they were angels, were they? He's talking to me, like, yeah, Jerry's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Good. Go ahead, Jerry.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on the near-death experience comment, because I think one of the results of that we've seen and had testimony for is that people who've had that experience realize for the rest of their lives that they're not their body. They were outside of their body witnessing something happening to their body. That's one of the experiences of a near-death experience. And this reveals a central theosophical idea, which is we are not our personality, we are not our physical form, we're not our names, we're not our language, etc., etc. There's something inside of us that's witnessing all of that. There's something deeper that we all sense, kind of a divine discontent, if you will, that is leading us to the source of our being in some way, that's watching our lives. Thoreau had that wonderful expression of strange sense of doubleness that every single human being at some point or another in their lives experiences, which is there's a part of you that's an actor in the world, a participant in the world, and there's another part of you that's observing and watching. Somewhere in that watching part, deeper within it, we want to talk about this idea of soul, of consciousness, and things like that. So when we talk about making changes, I think one of the things that Theosophy is trying to teach us, at least this is what this student has garnered from it, is that we shouldn't identify with a vehicle. If you're driving around with your car and you get a dent in it, you could say, well, I've got a dent. Well, wait a minute, you don't have a dent, the car's got a dent. When you say, I'm hungry or I'm thirsty, well, wait a minute, it's not you that's hungry or thirsty, it's your body that needs water and needs food, right? So it's interesting to look at it from the standpoint of the soul, which is what Theosophy is encouraging us to do, and say, yeah, I've been struggling with being patient. Well, that's a problem in the vehicle that needs adjustment. It's a blockage. It's dirt on the windshield, and it needs to be cleaned. But it's not you. And you get people in psychology and in what's called logotherapy. Ava Moberg is a friend of many of ours. People who get cancer, one of the first things that Ava does with her patients is say to them, your body has cancer, you don't have cancer. And I think that distinction of not identifying with our traits is critical to making changes and to gaining some degree of patience with ourselves too.
I'm only such that it would be fine to not leave self. I will help. Don't be so passive.
So we mentioned that, earlier as like a passive medium, and that was, discouraged by Blavatsky and Judge. But it was interesting. Jerry mentioned like a soul discontent, and I think that's a driving factor of a lot of people's discontent is that they're not getting in touch with their soul. And so I think that, everyone, they try to fill the void with external, distractions, and especially like these days, distraction, that will never lead to permanent happiness. And that's, I think, part of the discontent of a lot of people is not actually going inward and finding this, their true nature and their true self, what Jerry was talking about.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to find our true self or true happiness through binging TV shows or just almost non-activity, just distractions. Well,
I think we're out of time, but we're going to probably continue this in the next session because there's still more to go through. Some of the tests will come up, like you were talking about. She'll talk about there's a terrible law operative in nature, one which cannot be altered, who's clears up an apparent mystery of selection of certain chelas, and she'll kind of talk about the tests.
We'll provide a PDF for next week. I dropped the ball on it.
Anyone else? Any last comments or questions?
It's interesting what Jerry mentioned, because I was hearing something from on YouTube. Is explanation with Joe Dispenza. He's talking about the cellular intelligence, and he says that if you talk to your cells and you send the message, the right message, you can be cured from any disease, sickness.
Yeah, that's 100% possible. Even if you talk to water, if you're gentle and you talk to water and you project love to water change its nerve structure. and you can drink that water and get like the best of it. But also it's like, it's not just talking to yourself, it's also like nutrition, it's like a whole thing. Because I feel like it's like a ritualistic thing. The thing with magic and rituals is like, it helps you to, you don't need the candles, you don't need the dagger, you don't need the offerings, you don't need anything of that. It's just like your intention and your capacity to actually meditate within and set your intention, right?
Yeah.
But all those elements help you out to set the ambiance in a way.
I just need a little clarification about, as astrologically, what's gonna happen tomorrow.
Okay.
I think that's a way more time than we have.
Yeah. No. Tomorrow's gonna be like today, or a little bit different though.
Like Quan was talking about, I think just like talking to plants, I know Jerry talks to plants, right, Jerry?
Yeah.
Jerry, he was saying, talk to plants. Guaranteed.
Say it again, please.
He was mentioning about how if you send love or your attention goes into the water like responds or feels the attention trust with your intention. And he was saying it's probably a descendant to plants.
Ah,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. Yeah. Go plants. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Good night.
Well, the bottom line is,
What's your name?
it's a